Morning. My name's Patrick McGlinchey. I come from Scotland and I run Backwoods Survival School. Today I'd like to talk about a subject that's essential to bushcraft. The importance of fibres. And fibre is essential to our lives. Our largest external organ is made of fibre, our skin. Without it, we wouldn't be here. And quite simply, without fibre, there's not a lot of bushcraft going on. So I've titled this talk, The Fibres of Life. Can you all hear me okay? Yeah. Hi. The foundations of bushcraft are built on two materials. Father stone and mother fibre. When early humans brought these two materials together, it gave them huge advantages. It allowed them to thrive in many different environments. With a creative mind and an imagination, they transformed stone into effective and useful tools. They created arrow points, spears, axes, and knives. It gave them the advantage of the cutting edge. And mother fibre played a huge part in that also. And that's what I really want to explore today. Fibre and its many applications. So, there's two common fibres that we find in nature, with cellulose and protein-based fibres. And we find protein-based fibres in mammals. The skin is made of collagen fibre. We have sinew, we have cecums, intestines, bowel, bladder, and even veins, and so on. And when you think of what a vein's got to do in a lifetime, you know, it's got to be a strong material. We also have keratin fibres, and we'll find them in hoofs and horns. We'll find it in wool and hair. We'll also find collagen fibres in fish skin, and we'll find keratin fibres in feathers. Incredible byproducts with many, many different applications, as I hope to sort of show you during this talk. But we also find fibres in many other places. We'll find fibre in the dogfish egg sac. The skate family produce them as well. These fish will deposit them on the seaweeds. They're held onto the seaweed with tendrils. And that's an incredibly strong material. And that can be harvested. And you can actually make cordage from that. And of course, you have the mussel. Cordage from the sea. The mussel produces these very strong threads. And that allows the mussel to anchor itself to the rocks. You know, and if you go into the rocks and there's a colony of mussels there, you've probably got a carpet worth of these fibres. Incredibly strong. Some people call it sea silk. And I was reading an interesting article a few years ago that way back in the day, if you were a poor officer and you couldn't afford the gold embroidery in the cuffs of your tunic, this is the next best thing. The woman would gather these up and they would spin the fibres up into threads. And of course, you had that lovely gold embroidery. That's if you were poor. There's other fibres out there, like silk and spider silk and so on. There's such a wealth, and there's a lot of stuff still to be rediscovered. And of course, we have cellulose fibres. And we'll find cellulose fibres in trees and wood. Wood is made up of cellulose fibres, amongst other things. We'll also find fibre in plant stalks, leaf. We'll find it in the inner bark of many different types of trees. and of course, seed heads. So there's a wealth of fibre out there. It's not just about nettle. There's lots. Withies, I love stuff like this. You know, there's no work required. A simple, soft, flexible sapling could be cranked up into a very, very strong rope. And I call that ready-mades. And there's a few things out there. So you're not going to the bother of learning cordage or taking it through. It's already made. And anything that could do that on a finger has got a lot of potential. Okay? We also have vines and creepers. So you've got the rattan there, which is that and bamboo is the rock and roll of the jungle. Well, when you see what these people could do with this stuff, it's just mind-blowing. And also vines like hedera. And obviously roots. In this country, you've got a great history of using the spruce roots and so on. Even fungi, bracket fungi, will give you fibre. I'm sure you are all aware of this fungi, the Forms fermentarius. We could strip away that outer cuticle, take away the trauma layer, and pound it. And of course, you use that with your percussion firelighting kit, your pyrite and your flint, in the form of amadou. But you can also make a blanket from that stuff. You could make hats and bags. It's incredible. And I have some with me, and if anybody's interested looking at it. So fibre in its many applications. When you start out this journey and you get the trio, the axe, the knife, the saw, you just can't wait to go and cut something. And normally the first thing you cut, the first fibre you cut, is cellulose fibre. But over the years, I've noticed that when people get sharp toys like axes and knives, the first fibre they cut is collagen. They just can't resist in running their thumb over their axe to see if it's sharp. And of course it is. Anyway, when you start out this journey, you know, you'll get your knife and you then go and you might whittle a stick. Then you'll progress maybe onto some pot hooks and so on. And then, of course, the feather stick. And you start to learn about the knife. You start to learn how to use it safely, carving technique and control and so on. And there's a progression from that point. You then will go away, especially in Britain. The next stage is to carve a spoon. And that's an iconic utensil in bushcraft, isn't it? What is it? It's just something that delivers food to your mouth. I use my hands. But not when I'm eating my porridge. You know, you need a spoon. But anyway, it's more than just spoon carving. Back home when I'm teaching, I'll get the students to go and gather a nice limb. Go, look, observe, find a nice limb. But take a bit more than you need. And then they'll come back. And of course, they'll learn the process of splitting it, carving it, and creating a spoon. And the bit that they've got that's extra, I get them to carve a spindle and a hearthboard. Then I'll tell them, what else did you find out about that tree? Did it have a fibre that you could use for cordage? Does it have an edible leaf? Does it have a fruit, a flower, a berry? And so on. And you find over the years, if you go to different trees and you do that, you end up with a pile of spoons like that. And you've developed your eye and hand coordination, you've developed your carving skills, but you know so much more about that tree. And then, of course, once that wood's seasoned, then you can compare all these wonderful different woods to see how they work with the fire bow and so on. So there's a lot of progressive technique in there. So it's not just about spoon carving. Another essential technique, as far as I'm concerned, is the ability to make a container, something that will hold something. So you might be in an area where you have a lot of soft fibres, rushes and grasses and so on. And this is where coiling comes in. You can coil a basket. And there's more to the basket than meets the eye. If you can coil a basket, you could filter water. You can take all those big particles out of the water, and of course you've still got to boil it to purify it. If you want to carry water, you can coil a basket. And then you can seal it. You don't make the basket, you make a bottle. Then you seal it with resin. And that will allow you to move through the landscape, carrying water, which is important. Another way of creating a container, and we're still using fibre. This is all about the fibre and its many, many applications. You might find yourself, you're in a stand of birch. And of course, we all know the lovely properties of the birch. We could make containers, canoes, and many other things. We could fold that birch. We could stitch it. We could create interlocking cuts. We could make many things from it. But there's also other trees out there, like cedar and leylandii, where we could make buckets and so on. Good for foraging. But essentially, all you're doing is working that fibre in a different way. Another way of making a container is weaving the basket. And you might be in an area where you've got access to lots of flexible saplings, or willow, for example, being a classic weaving material. And a number of years ago, I was at an event, and I was weaving the basket. These are my baskets I was weaving with. And this guy came up to me, and we got chatting. I thought he was interested in what I was doing. And it wasn't long before he said to me, basket making is for blind folks and grannies. And I was actually quite shocked by that. The conversation didn't last much longer than that. Yeah. And as he walked away, on his back, in big letters, he had Bushcraft instructor. And I thought, well, he needs to go back to school. If you understand basic weaving techniques, you could progress that into many other areas. Of course, you could make a backpack. You could make a basket for foraging for mushrooms and whatever you're after. You could apply that into advanced shelter building. Watling daub. Yeah? You could take it onto the shoreline. You can make a creel. That creel will provide you with either fish, crabs, lobster, and so on. So there's more to a basket than just a basket. But the thing is, it doesn't matter which environment you're in. You have the techniques to make these things. You're never short. So, and for me, these are valuable skills. I found over the years that it seems, and I've been told, is that not women's work? This is the thing I get in Britain. And there's a lot of people that would rather, and I've did the little tests. There's times when I've had a big pile of fibre there, and I'll say, would you like to learn about this fibre? We could play with it and make something. Or, would you like to take one of those Gransfors axes? We could cut down that tree and delimb it and section it. Well, guess what they pick? They go for the axe. It's sexy. It's exciting. It's manly. Well, if you get into basket making, you'll probably find that after a day, your fingers aren't working. You know what I mean? Basket makers have got fingers like piano players. You know what I mean? And it's not women's work. And for me, it's an essential skill. Oh, sorry. Another type of fibre that we could manipulate is collagen fibre. Hide tanning, brain tanning, egg tanning, where we take the raw hide and we take it through a stage and we manipulate fibres till they're nice and soft. And of course, from that fabric, we could then start to create many, many different things. Everything from mitts, moccasins, bags, and so on. We can also manipulate that fibre in a different way by bark tanning. And of course, we're going back to the tree to extract the tannin from it. And there's many different types of tannin we can get, everything from alder, oak, and so on. And then we move that raw hide into soft leather, working leather. And of course, from that, again, you could make many, many different things. And that's a pair of pants I made last year for a laugh. Somebody called them Daisy Dukes. I ain't getting into them, but I tell you, those days are over. But these are made from bowel, bartan bowel, very, very soft fabric. And of course, the waistband is bartan fishskin. But it's one thing when you get that sheet of buckskin. The progressive skill after that is tailoring, the ability to tailor and make effective clothing for the environment. And you only need to look at the Inuit people. Oh, Teresa, her tailoring is exceptional. Absolutely wonderful. Not just that, the next progressive skill is the ability to sew. And of course, that's a skill that's dying out in our age. I love sewing. Back home, my kids would come in and say, Dad, could you put a button on that? Or could you take the hem up in this? And so on. Sewing's essential. And it's all part of this rich fibre craft. And I've noticed over the years, when the students are sitting around the fire, and of course, they're so happy to have rediscovered like an ancient way of lighting fire. They've brought that old skill up to the present day, and they now hold that magic. And they get talking. Most times around the fire, they debate about what's the difference between bushcraft and survival and so on. But when they're talking about the old skill sets, I tell them about when I was young, your granny had a big jar full of buttons. And as kids, you'd play drafts with them, of course. She'd have another jar full of zips and balls of wool, because that time you unraveled the wool, then it was crocheted into bed blankets. And of course, people sewed. You know what I mean? I've not seen anybody here with an elbow patch on their jacket or shirt. And it seems this is the modern way. If you get a hole in something or the button falls off, you just go and buy a new one. So that essential skill of sewing is disappearing in our time, but we're not noticing it. But that's the way things are going. So, even firelighting, we need fibre. If you're looking at the friction methods of firelighting, everything from the hand drill, the plough, the bow drill, the fire saw, and so on, all you're doing again is manipulating fibre. And you'll manipulate that fibre in such a way that you develop a coal. And of course, to take that baby up, you then got to use fibre, soft fibres, cattail seed heads, knapweed, thistledown, and so on. And then, of course, you're into the softer fibres of grass, and then you finally go into kindling and so on. So fibre is essential. We're not doing much without fibre. If you want to go out hunting, you need to know about fibre. Your bow is going to be made of fibre. If you want to create an arrow, your arrow is going to be made from fibre. If you want to bind your projectile point onto that, well, we need fibre for that. If you want to stabilize your arrow, well, guess what? You need fibre for that, a feather or a leaf. And of course, if you can't make the cordage for that bow, you've got a stick, or you're back to hunting with a spear. So it runs through everything. If you want to trap, you're going to be using snares. If you want to make mechanical devices, you're having to manipulate that fibre. And there might be some considerations there if you're using a snare. You're going to be after either a carnivore or a herbivore. And that carnivore is capable of ripping through collagen fibres like sinew and skin. And of course, the herbivore eats the stuff. So you might have some considerations to think in there. Also, you'll have soft fibres and wiry fibres. A wiry fibre will hold a shape far better than a soft fibre. Less sticks needed to prop it up and so on. If you want to go harpooning or spearing fish, you'll need fibre again, binding that projectile point on, and of course the shaft. There's not much we do in bushcraft without fibre, to be honest with you. Fishing. If you want to go fishing with a hook and line, you need to be able to make cordage. If you want to net, as I explained to some people the other day there, if cordage is a key, that'll open the door to net making. And of course, from net making, you know, we could use it in the lakes and lochs, but we could also use it in the land. We could make bags, we could make hammocks, and so on. It's a never-ending set of progressive techniques. If you want to lay traps in deep water, again, you're needing fibre. You're back to creating the basket creel, cordage for your rope, and then, of course, you need a buoy. And we can make buoys from many things. This one is a bark-tanned cow's bladder. But there's other things we could do or use. If you want to get access to the water, it's all about the fibre. And this is where the collagen fibre meets the cellulose fibre. And again, you can see where that basket-making technique evolves into another skill. You're making these flat-bottom coracles, and then you're stretching it over with collagen fibre, the skin. And this was, for me, the ultimate fibre project that I've done so far. I have others on the go, like skin shelters and so on. So you can see fibre is very important. And I'm not even covering everything. There's many more applications. But what I'd like to do is just make people aware of just how important that is. It seems to be getting lost somewhere, or it's down at the end of a list. Well, for me, it's right up there at the front. So I'd like to narrow in and look at cordage. And this is some of the cordages I've made over the years. A lot of them are twisted, a lot of them are braided, and so on. And there's a fantastic museum down in Oxford, in England, called the Pitt Rivers Museum. And I was so overwhelmed when I got there one day. They've got a huge case of every friction firelighting method in there, percussion firelighting and everything. They've got another hall where you've got birch bark canoes and reed boats and Polynesian boats. And they've got wonderful, massive big cabinet. I've never seen anything like it. And it's just full of cordage and ropes from all over the world. And what surprised me about that was about 80% of them were braided. They weren't twisted. They were braided, plated. Quite incredible. So there's the list of some of the fibres that I'm sure a lot of you know some of them. And by no means is that a complete list. There's lots of stuff out there that I believe that are still to be rediscovered or discovered. It's just we don't use them commercially. Wolf willow, cordyline, mussels, nettles, we've got everything there. So I've picked out two fibres, two inner bark fibres. The tilia, we call it the lime tree, the linden tree, basswood, and so on. And what I found over the years, when I've been running my school, when it comes to cordage, it's almost like bird watching. People seem to make it like 10 foot of the stuff out of nettle. And that's the end of the journey. And it always seems to be the same diameter as parachute cord. Strange. And it's almost like bird watching. When you get bird watchers and they go out and as soon as they saw that little tit or that little robin, boom, it's ticked. It's off the list. They've learned all they need to learn. I'm still learning about it. It's a never-ending, progressive skill. So tilia. In springtime, I'll strip the bark off. When the sap's high, I'll separate the outer from the inner. I'll coil up the inner bark, as you can see there. And then the outer stuff, if I've cut the strips wide enough, I'll make containers and baskets, and I'll use it as a weaving material, because there's still a lot of integrity left in it. And that'll be left, if I'm up in the woodland, it'll be left in a stagnant pond. At home, I'll put it in a barrel. And you'll read in the books and the YouTube that it might take 6 to 8 weeks. Well, in Scotland, it could take 6 months. We get November weather in June, kind of a thing. And it needs a constant temperature and the bacteria to build up to break down the glues. And if I miss the season, or I have a cold summer, sometimes it doesn't even ret at all. It starts to degrade. The fiber's not worth anything just because it's been soaking for such a long time. But if everything's constant, the weather's good, and you've got a lot of good bacterial action, you'll end up with a pile of mush like that. It goes all soft and floppy. Smells like excrement. Yeah. My wife told me I'm not to do it near the house anymore. the neighbours are complaining. But once it's like that, of course, you could rinse it out, and then you could separate it off into its individual ribbons. And when you look at those ribbons, you'll notice that there's varying quality. The fibre that's closest to the wood is the best stuff, and the stuff that's nearer the outer bark is the poorer quality. So I'll separate these up for different projects. And you can see the difference. You know, this stuff here in the bottom right, that's up against the wood. The stuff to the left is porous and woody. Still useful though. You'll still get good utility ropes out of it. But if you want fine fishing lines and so on, you go for the best quality. Another one, and I think some of you used it yesterday, is the ulmus glabra. We call it Scots elm, witch elm, slippery elm. And again, you could gather that up in the springtime. And once again, you separate the outer from the inner, as you can see. And I normally use the tool, the nail, to pull the fibres apart. Now, this one doesn't need to soak for that length of time, probably about 4 days. And all you're doing is either leaving it a slow-moving stream or putting it in a bucket. And you'll find with the fresh water from the morning, by the end of the night, it'll be the colour of urine. Probably by day 2, it's the colour of an iced tea. And by day 3, it's like coffee. You're leaching the tannins out of that. You're breaking down the glues and everything. If you don't do that, you get a very brittle fibre. As you twist it up, the fibre will break. So you've got to leach all of that out of them. And that's what it looks like probably in day 4. But I don't know if you can see it there, but what you've got is a gloop that develops, almost like a wallpaper paste. And I used to wonder what you could do with that. Till one day I sort of held a bunch and I pulled it out, and it looked like frog spawn. And I thought, that's sticky, that's a use for it. And I put up 2 posters in my son's bedroom with it. It's a natural wallpaper paste. So even the byproduct has a use. And once that's done, washed, cleaned, and then you have your fibre. And I'll let that fibre dry. The drying process shrinks the cell walls. If you use it just as it is, you'll find that your cordage is very loose. Okay, so I might take that through 2 stages of shrinkage. So I'll let it dry, then I'll rehydrate it, and I'll shrink it again. And I find with that I get a lot less shrinkage in the final piece. Also, when I'm using it, it's damp, it's not soaking wet. Okay? And of course, you could store that. You could use that any time of the year. And that's important, working with the seasons. You know, so in springtime, I'll go around and I'll look at all the different plants and trees that are going to give me a fibre. And there's a window of opportunity there. Because as you approach autumn, those fibres are not going to be available. But that's when the plant fibres come in. They've gone through their life cycle. And of course, then you could harvest them. And of course, over the winter months, you've got access to roots. Or if you've been successful with your hunting, you have access to the collagen byproduct. So you should never be without fibre. Me personally, when I go on expedition, my boots are, I use paracord in my boots because I'm never without fibre. It might be around me, but I've got it on me as well. So, what is cordage? Well, a collection of fibres of different lengths that can be spun, braided, or twisted into a continuous length. I think that says it all. And cordage is not just about 10 foot of paracord thickness. It's everything from thread, utility string, and rope. Thread for sewing and fishing lines, utility string that will cover a wide array of different projects, and ropes for hauling. And a few years ago, I was asked by the BBC to make a rope. Just over thumb thickness, 150 foot long. And they've got me abseiling with it. And I was telling some folks yesterday, when I used to take my children to the swimming bath, I used to get some strange looks. So, when you're showing people how to sharpen a knife, you can't resist rolling your arm up and saying, look how sharp this is. Well, of course, I'd been thigh rolling that rope for a couple of weeks. And when I got into the swimming bath, I had no hairs here, and just a big callus from my knee to the thigh. So, yeah, you get some odd looks. Anyway, constructing cordage. Well, there's lots of ways of constructing cordage. There's lots of ways of doing everything, of course. We could use mechanical devices, cranks and spinning sticks and so on. I like to use the digits. I'm not really one for gadgets and gizmos. But to construct a cordage, I always construct cordage, whether it's thread, string or rope. I always do it with multi-fibres. I don't just get one strand, fold it in half and start spinning up and adding in at 2 points. That for example, I'll even split further once I get the process started. And it's important that you stagger that. So when you bend that, you might have 2/3 on one side and 1/3 on the other side, not straight haft. And then you'll find, and do it with different sizes of fibre. That way, you've got add-in points all the way through it. That way, you don't notice the add-in when you're doing it. And you get stronger cordage. So you're getting that bundle of fibres, and normally what I'll do is you'll take it from a flat profile, and by spinning it all together, you're teaching it to be round in profile. And that's what it looks like. And the technique I use is the open-handed method, okay? This method here, I can't see what I'm doing. I can feel it. With the open-handed method, you've got control of it. It's faster, in my opinion. And also, you see the diameter of the 2 strands, okay? So that's the beginning. You're putting a little kink in, or what is known as the lock. And then you bring it together, and it twists up. And there's a little video of that. That lock just brings it together. The more twist you could put in, the more lock you get. And I usually work with either a V formation or a Y formation. So this is the beginning. You'll pinch it at the base of the V, and then you'll transfer your hand over. And I use the thumb as a roller. This finger is an anvil, and these 2 fingers for holding. And there's other little techniques in there as well. I'll develop the kink. I'll then transfer over, and then I'll twist it up from the back. And I've made a little video of that also. And the reason I told you I like that technique, this twisting, you're not seeing anything. It's like trying to read a closed book. When you do it that way, the book is opened, and you could read it better, in my opinion. Adding in, splicing in. Well, again, you've got to ensure that you have many, many add-in points. Another thing to keep note of is that those 2 strands are the same diameter. You don't want a thin against a thick. That'll cause you problems. You'll add in, if one strand is all rolled up, you want to unravel that. You don't want to just add a strand in and onto that twist. That's what happens. And all you're doing then is building in weakness into the piece. So I made a little video there as well, how to add in. And of course, if you can add in, you can also take away. So if you find one strand's getting a bit bulkier, just unravel it, pull a strand back, and continue on that road. Of course, you could trim all those loose ends off at the end of it. One of my students pointed this technique out to me, and it's not a technique I favour, adding in like that. First of all, you're adding in two strands, and you're adding in one on the other side as well. It's all about controlling the diameter of that. And what I found with that is you get a thin, then a thick, or a bump, all the way along the cordage. Sometimes you end up with something that's parachute thick cord, and then you end up with something that's as thick as your finger. It's all about controlling that diameter. From A to Z, it should be consistent. Strength and integrity. Well, I hear a lot of people talking about fibres, and they'll say that, you know, like fireweed makes a great cordage. Yeah, of course it makes cordage. But you'll probably find that nettle grows alongside fireweed. Why invest your time in a weak fibre? Of course, play with it and so on. If you go to the bother of creating a hook from bone or antler or wood or whatever, and a weight, and you create like 100 feet of fine cordage, and you take it to the water and you get a fish, you're losing a lot. All the calories it's taken to gather up those materials and process them, the time it's taken to make the cordage. So it needs to be fit for purpose. Yeah? So if you're going to do it right. The masters of fibre crab, the people of the reeds, a few years back, I couldn't wait to go down to Lake Titicaca near the Bolivian border to spend some time with these people, the Uros people. And they have the Totoro reed. And it was quite mind-blowing. These people create islands from the root structure of those reeds. They cut away in blocks, they connect it up, then they anchor it to the lake with poles. And then they lay more reeds on it. So they've got a floating island. They make their houses out of the reeds. They have clay stoves. They'll take the clay from the lake bed and they'll make stoves. The fuel they burn in these stoves is the reed stalks. They move about these islands on reed boats. They eat waterfowl, ducks on, that live in the reeds with reed snares and so on. Whoa, all for one plant. These people are the masters of this fibre craft. And if you ever get an opportunity to go down that way, you'll be as blown away as I was. So, I think that's the end of the talk, short and sharp. But I would like to leave you with a passing thought. Our ancestors would never have crossed the great oceans. They'd never have scaled the highest peaks. And the Inuit people would never have thrived in such a hostile environment without the humble fibre. So thank you very much. Thank you.